On this episode of Believe in Lightning, we're taking a look at the first two games of the season for the Lightning. We talk about how they're doing thus far. We talk about some of the factors into going how they are playing thus far, as well as we look towards tonight's game against the Vegas Golden Knights. All that coming up and more in Believe in Lightning. And welcome to another episode of Believe in Lightning, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Believe in Lightning. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there for some new content coming out, as well as our Instagram page, as well as our Twitter page as well. You can find out more shows surrounding your favorite teams over at Believe.com at the Believe Network. So we're very early on in the NHL season, and it's always hard to evaluate a team, whether they're doing good or bad in the first couple of games, because it's especially when you're talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning and how one could make the case that this team hasn't really been challenged. And that's no disrespect towards the teams that they have played thus far, the Carolina Hurricanes and the Vancouver Canucks. But when you look at those games and you sit down and you do the eye test, something that I really hold a lot of weight in, at least for when you're evaluating teams game to game, the eye test, the Lightning passed with flying colors. I think we could all agree that what we have seen thus far out of this team has been very good. And then when you look in more detail at the numbers, 2-0, obviously, that's what you love to see. The Lightning are outscoring their opponents 8-2. The penalty minutes aren't that bad. They're at 16 on the season. Would like to kind of get that a little bit down more. Two power play goals, so that's okay. For now, 2 out of 11. You're gonna get that number up. Like I said, it's 2 games. You can't really evaluate the numbers, especially the eye test. Like I said, they've passed. I think that this team has played very sustainable hockey thus far. That's something that is going to be a big topic of conversation when we're continuing to evaluate this team throughout the course of the season. I think that really the key is for the Lightning on a nightly basis, and this was something maybe if you've listened to some of our earlier episodes, is really not only are the Lightning winning games, whether it be against teams that maybe are not as good as they are or teams that are significantly better than them. You got to take a look at all the wins and you got to find the carryover. And that's really something that we didn't see last season. For the most part, instead of when you're not looking at the month of March, and which was the Lightning's best month thus far, all the entire season last year, you would look and see very inconsistent performances, whether it be in wins and losses. And there was a couple of games there really, I think that a lot of Lightning fans can make the case for and agree on that really the Lightning had no business winning those games. And there was a lot of games in which there was lost opportunities. And that really was the only carryover we saw last season was the inconsistencies. Now, obviously, in the game of hockey, as well as the NHL, the key is to be as consistent as possible. And I have always been a firm believer, especially with this Lightning team, when you're looking at them and you see what personnel they have, is that really you have the pieces there, whether you're talking about a certain Lightning team that now especially does not have a certain player that we shall not name, who, by the way, in my opinion, has not got off to a good start. And I firmly believe his performance would not really have any effect on these Lightning games. These first 2 games, obviously, the Lightning are playing well. But I think when you're evaluating this team and you look at the personnel, because that is also something that is going to be a constant topic of conversation, is does this Lightning team have all the right pieces? Now, that's something that we could address down the road when we get closer to Thanksgiving, because that's really when you have enough games under your belt as a team to kind of have that fair assessment. and be able to kind of figure out what direction this team is going to be, because in my 5 seasons covering the Tampa Bay Lightning, I have always held the idea that really once you start to get around Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, to our Canadian listeners, or even as late as Christmas and New Year, that's when you could start making assumptions and kind of figure out what kind of team and what kind of season we're going to have. But this Lightning team, really, back to the consistency part, the key is for them is just, I think I stated this in the last episode. If not, listeners who have followed me over from my previous work and new ones alike will get very in tuned and very almost sick and tired of me saying that really, if the Lightning can do the small things from game to game, that will set up the ground and the foundation for the bigger pieces on this Lightning team to get the big things done, to get the good things. You know, if you can't have good zone entries, if you can't play discipline in the neutral zone, if you're not playing even disciplined on special teams, whether it be on the penalty kill or on the power play, then you're going to have issues. Then you're not going to be able to score goals here and there. Obviously, you're not going to be able to get good looks on in the attacking zone, and you're not going to be able to play well in your own zone. So as long as the Lightning, if you're a Lightning fan, and even if someone that's just looking from the outside looking in, if you're going to take anything through these first 2 games, whether it be as a team or if you're evaluating certain players, the best way to go about it is really just ask yourself this simple question. Do they have good fundamentals? Because if they have good fundamentals, everything else is going to fall into place. I was a little skeptical this summer with some of the moves they made, some of the additions that they had, some of the subtractions that they had. Thus far, if I had to grade the Lightning through the first 2 games, I would give them probably a B, a solid B. They haven't really done anything spectacular. They've beaten the teams that they have really expected. I think we all really would have expected them to beat in these first 2 games. And I said it on Twitter, I think yesterday or the day before, that, okay, this is great, but now the first big test is going to be with Vegas. And we're going to be talking about that later on in the show. So stick around for that. You know, how does Tampa Bay line up with these Vegas Golden Knights, who, I don't care who you are or what you thought about the Golden Knights last year or even coming into this season, they're still a very good hockey team. Any team out of the West, really, for that most part, except for maybe a handful, are very competitive teams. That's going to be the games that are really, I think, going to be the measuring stick for these Tampa Bay Lightning players this season. I said it on my previous podcast when I was host of Locked On Lightning, that really the best thing for a hockey team, whether they're struggling or not, whatever the case may be, just go on a West Coast trip. That'll give you a way to figure things out. And so, you know, even though the Lightning aren't going on a West Coast trip, playing a West Coast team, that's probably as good of a valuation early on in the season as we're going to get, especially for what's coming up afterwards, as you get Ottawa, Toronto, Jersey, Washington, who I'm still on the fence about how I feel. And then there's some other teams coming up that I think are going to at least give good games and exciting games for the Lightning to play in. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But right now we're going to discuss some of the players that are going to or have been a huge part of the Lightning success this early on in the season. I really think that, you know, some players are still kind of figuring it out. Not everybody picks it up as easily as others. You know, for example, Nikita Kucherov, he has just picked up where he left off last season. So we're going to talk about that. But I just want to remind you, please go ahead, subscribe to the podcast, give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. If you want to follow more of my work, go on over to The Hockey News. I cover the Lightning for them. So check out my work there. You can follow me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. Love hearing from you all. If you have questions that you want me to answer on the show, go ahead, hit me up there. And you can follow more of our content on our social media pages over at Believe in Lightning on Instagram and Believe in Bolts on Twitter. So check that out. So the Lightning, like we just got done saying, have been pretty good in their first two games, as good as you would have liked them to have been in the first two games of the season. And a lot of it obviously has to do with some of their top players. One for which is Andrei Vasilevskiy, who I said was going to be a very big part, not only because obviously he's the goaltender and this is really a one goalie system in Tampa, something that really we are starting to see less and less of around the league. There's very few teams that you look at across the NHL where you could really say, at least during the regular season, that this is their guy. I think really a lot of teams, and I think that's also something that, we could get into a bigger conversation with that down the road for another episode. But it's really a good and a bad thing to have that, because you could turn to a guy who obviously what you're getting out of him. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about him being cold. You just throw him out there and you're going to get where you're going to get. But it's also a bad thing if that guy is not playing well, as we kind of saw at times last season. Vasilevskiy comes back from the back surgery that kept him out for the first 2 months of the season, which I have a lot of thoughts still on that. But I think that he came back. He had his moments where it looked like he was his old self, and he had moments where he was just completely disconnected from what he was trying to do. It looked like at times his brain and the movements of his body were not on the same page. It looked like, especially at times, that he was not up to speed, which was something that was very concerning for a lot of Lightning fans, including yours truly. And I said, though, going into the summer, that even though it was a very brief playoff series, and I do have an article talking about this on the Hockey News that will be coming out tomorrow, so check that out. I post all my work on my Twitter page. So if you just want the quick link to that, go to that at DenkyDank, DENKYD8NK. I talk about it in the article, and I'll talk about it here on the show, of course, how even though it was a very brief series against the Florida Panthers, I think a lot of Lightning fans went into that with realistic expectations that we were not going to win that series. Lightning were just not where we wanted them to be. And then, especially in the last couple of weeks of the season, after that very, very, very good month of March, where they only lost 2 games, you go in April, you're practically everybody, once they clinched the playoff spot, kind of just checked out. It wasn't just, one player. It was pretty much everybody except for really Steven Stamkos, who is no longer with us. But you go into that playoff series and obviously you lose to the eventual Stanley Cup champions. And the defense was obviously not there. The blue line protection was not there for this Tampa Bay Lightning team. And I thought, all things considered, Vasilevskiy had a very impressive series. His numbers don't look so good on paper when you check them out for that series. But like I said, I thought that, all things considered, he was very impressive. He kept them in that series for and that may not sound like a lot considering they did lose in 5, but considering how good that team was, that Panthers team, and considering how just at times horrible the defense was all around, I thought Vasilevskiy played very well, and I thought that was really important for him going into the summer, especially having that confidence. And to start the first 2 games of the season, I haven't seen anything great, and that's the thing that maybe some people kind of they mix up when you're talking about a great player such as Andrei Vasilevskiy. Well, he doesn't look spectacular. He doesn't have to be spectacular. He just has to be good. He's that talented. And I said it throughout the summer. I said it even during the playoff series, that it's not about, and it goes back to my mantra that I said before in the first segment. He doesn't have to make these behind the back saves he doesn't have to do, stand on his head to do this and that. He only has to make the little saves. Because with Vasilevskiy, the issue has always been, especially the last couple of seasons, he's not making the saves that he should be making. And a lot of people have made excuses for him. Well, there's only a certain amount of goaltenders in the league that may make that or make that save or whatever. Well, guess what? He is part of that certain amount of goaltenders. I and even some of the goals he has given up have really, for the most part, have been very soft. And you will find out if you are a new listener of mine that, you know, if he gives up an impressive goal, I will give him the benefit of the doubt. But there are goals that we have seen in the past where he is just, I don't care, to be a top 10 goaltender in this league, you have to make those saves, even a top 5. And, even when he was not up to where we want him to be, where we have expected him to be, that goaltender that has won the Vezina Trophy, that has won the Conn Smythe, that is where you need him to be. And, it's not like he's entering the back end of his career. He's still very much in his prime. If he can't make those saves, the Lightning are in trouble. But what we have seen from him these first couple of games have been just doing the little things, making the little saves here and there, obviously with a little help from some crossbar and some little weird deflections and just some missed opportunities by the opposing team. But I haven't really seen a sequence of him being where he's felt overmatched, where his body language has been bad. And that's really the positive thing that I think Lightning fans should take away from these first very early games. Obviously, tonight against Vegas will be a different story. I'm very curious to see what Vegas throws at him as opposed to, how he reacts to that. That's going to be very important, especially early on. So that's been very big to see him play the way he has played. And I think really that's what you should take home is that if Vasilevskiy is making the little saves and he doesn't look like he's laboring out there, that is not only very good for him, but obviously very good for this Lightning team. Another player on this team that I thought has very much impressed me, we got into him a little bit just a few minutes ago, but I got to mention him again, is Nikita Kucherov. Just continues to amaze me just on a nightly basis, scores a hat trick on opening night, and just continues to rack up the points. I mean, what more is there to be said about this guy, really? I mean, his just ability to just look ageless out there. He is 31. He has a history of extensive injuries. That does play a factor when you're evaluating hockey players, believe it or not. But his ability, and we said going into the season that it was going to be very important for him to get going because obviously things have changed. The chemistry has changed just a little bit. The recipe to scoring goals and winning games is obviously different now than it has been over the last 16 years. And I think that really his ability to kind of step up into that leadership role, which, let's be frank about it, there's been times where he has not been a leader on the ice, whether it be with his play or just with the way you see him conducting himself out there. I think that this offseason really was Kucherov's year to really grow into that role. Even though he wears an A, he is making a very big, if he hasn't already to some Lightning fans, he's making a very good case as to why he should have been picked for the C. I'm not saying I don't have an issue with that I have an issue with Hedman. Absolutely not. I think Hedman being captain was a no-brainer and very well deserved. But if you could have a captain A2 or whatever, so two guys wear a C, it would have to be Kucherov, considering what he has done through these first 2 games, spreading out the puck. Like I said, 4 goals, 5 points. Definitely the need for him to score more, and you see that in these first 2 games. And I think that really allowing him to kind of not have to focus on a single player, to where you could kind of you're especially in this early stages of the season, you're kind of molding the very premature or whatever you want to call it, what analogy you want to use, the clay that is this Lightning offense, allowing a seasoned vet, almost a master at doing so in Nikita Kucherov, to be able to kind of just play around with that and spread the puck and spread the love. That's really something that I really like. Even though the assist numbers don't really tally for that, nonetheless, his presence really shows because you have Hedman scoring points here and there. You have Getzel on the board. Point obviously is doing what we all expect him to do, especially with the need to have another scorer step up. Cirelli scored the other night, which I thought, and I even said coming into the season, and I wrote an article about it for the Hockey News. Cirelli is going to be a huge, huge part of what this Lightning team is going to be in terms of offensive success this year. So seeing him get his first goal of the season, that was really big the other night. It's just all a matter of him continuing to get that production going. And I really do expect Anthony Cirelli to play on the first line at some point this season continuously, not be subbed in throughout the course of games. Brandon Hagel, he has a goal and an assist. I expect him to really get going. I like what I've seen out of him. He is really much past the eye test, and a lot could be said for a lot of these guys on this team. Even Ryan McDonough, who there were some question marks about him coming into the season. What version of Ryan McDonough are we going to get? Are we going to get the Ryan McDonough from his very brief stint in Nashville? Are we going to get Ryan McDonough from his time in Tampa Bay? Right now, it kind of looks like we might get a little bit of mixture of both. So far, it's a little bit more leaning towards Tampa. I'm hoping that John Cooper sees that wasn't just a phase and how the structure was in Nashville with McDonough. I hope that we do kind of unlock some of that offensive potential from him, and he's not just pigeonholed into this defensive role on this Lightning team. I mean, there's so many players we could get into. Nick Paul, three assists to start the season, but so far this Lightning team has looked very well, and everybody is rolling on all cylinders thus far. Gergensons was flying around the other night. That was good to see from him. Geeky is still kind of feeling things out through 2 games. I think just, for all you people that are really kind of almost worried to an extent about him getting going, he's still very young. He's still very raw. He's going to need, a couple of weeks. And even that, I said American Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, that's kind of when you start to look at your team and see what you got and evaluate guys. I would even throw it back a little bit more further down in the future for Geeky, because like I said, it's his first year in the NHL. He's a rookie, still very young. His body, that's the other thing. You forget that these young rookies, a lot of them are still they're not grown men yet. They're still growing. So, a lot of it is him adapting his game to, what he's physically capable of. But I think, you're in a good place right now if you're a Lightning player and a Lightning fan, seeing a lot of these players come to the table. And that's really what this season's going to be about, is that you need everybody coming to the table doing their part. The days of relying on your top 6 are really gone. And really, it's going to be really the manifestation of a team effort here in Tampa Bay. So once again, I want to thank you all for tuning in to this new episode of Believe in Lightning. If you haven't already done so, I'm going to nag you one more time. Please go ahead, subscribe to the podcast, give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. Tell your friends, tell your family. We'll be racking up the content in the coming weeks. I know we were trying to aim for about 2 to 3 this week. That didn't work out. There really wasn't much that content to be done just because of, the Lightning really have only played 2 games, but they got a game tonight, and their schedule is going to be ramping up as well. So will ours. So keep an eye out for that. Hit that notification button if you're listening or watching on an app. Go ahead and do that. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. So the Lightning now, thankfully, are playing a game tonight. They'll be facing off against the Vegas Golden Knights. Coming to this game with a record of 3-1-0. The Lightning are undefeated thus far. And, if we want to break down the stats, we can, but really, you can't really read too much into it. Like I said, Vegas is 4 games in, Lightning are 2. So it's just really can't evaluate the numbers in a fair way. Vegas has a 30.8% on the power play, which, I mean, as opposed to the Lightning's 18. Can't really read too much into that. Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure how many power play opportunities Vegas has had as opposed to the Lightning, but I think that really what the key is for this game is just go out there, continue what you're doing, get off to an early start, which the Lightning have been doing, which is a very positive thing to see for any Lightning fan. And just go out there and try not to get overwhelmed by the size of Vegas. I think that is something that we kind of saw last year. I think that for the most part, the Lightning played very well last year against Vegas. That was big when they were on that stretch on the West Coast. They went out there, they beat Vegas on the road in Vegas, which was a big win for the Lightning at the time, which kind of kicked off their pretty impressive month of March. Not saying that this is going to be a jump starter, but I think you're going up against a team like this is something that is, I think, like I said earlier in the podcast, and I said to a listener on Twitter, that it's going to be our first really good sample of the Lightning going up against one of the best in the NHL. And it just because whether or not they win or lose tonight, that's not going to really determine what happens going forward. But at least it's going to allow us to kind of see maybe some of the holes that maybe are lingering there that haven't really been exposed for this Lightning team. And like I said before as well, is that I really think that this is going to be a very good game for Andrei Vasilevskiy, kind of a heat check moment, because obviously you're going up against a significantly better team than a Vancouver Canucks or a Carolina Hurricanes. You're going up against a team who has really a legitimate chance to win the Stanley Cup this year. I would imagine we're going to see Adin Hill in net tonight. If not, Ilya Samsonov. Lightning fans will be familiar with him during his time in the East. And I would imagine we're going to see Vasilevskiy after so much time off. I said it, I think, on the last podcast that I don't expect to see Jonas Johansson until maybe the end of October, if anything. I don't think that John Cooper is itching to throw him out there as well either. Not saying that Johansson is in the doghouse or anything. I mean, he didn't really play that well last season. But also you want to go out there and get your top dog going. And that's the big thing. And I think that really, if the Lightning could go into this game, have a good performance on the ice, Vasilevskiy has a good performance in net, win or lose, I think that as long as they're doing things the right way, because that does happen. That does happen where, and we've seen it, we saw it multiple times last year. The Lightning will go out there, they'll play a good game, and they just won't win because they're just not as good as the other team on that night. That's just sometimes the way the cookie crumbles in any sport. So I think, for my prediction for tonight, and I'm going to try and roll these out every single time the Lightning play a game. And I want to see your predictions, whether it be on Twitter, you could tweet to me, or if you want to drop them below this video. I would probably say the prediction for tonight's game is going to be a 4-3 win for the Lightning, maybe some late game heroics. I would expect Point to maybe have 2 points tonight. I would like to see a couple of points from Hedman. I would like to see Connor Geeky get his first point, his first goal, tonight. I think really, as much as I said, and his first point tonight, I would hope to see him a little bit more active tonight as well. He only has one shot on goal the entire season in 2 games. I think the key for a guy like him is just don't get too caught up in what's ahead of you. Just focus on what you're trying to do, and your line mates, and you'll be fine. And I would like to see more of the blue line offensive output tonight. I would like to see Ryan McDonagh get a point. I would like to see Darren Radish get a goal or a point. I think that's the other thing that we have not discussed at all real quick on this show, is that Darren Radish has an absolute cannon of a shot. And I don't feel like that's been utilized that well. We've talked about it in the past when Mikhail Sergachev was with Tampa. He was very good at putting pucks through traffic, and just for whatever reason, whether it was the player itself or just the Lightning in terms of what they want to do out there in the net, on the ice. I just don't understand. You have a lot of these defensemen, whether or not you think that they're good goal scorers or can put up a lot of points. Big part of the Lightning game is traffic, and the best way to get traffic is shots from the point. And especially with a team like Vegas, who a lot of big bodied guys on that team who, yes, are good at plugging traffic, but that doesn't mean you go away from that. You gotta mix it up. That's the one thing that I think that is going to be, I think, one of the keys, the main key, other than starting early, is how often are the Lightning going to dip into well, we're going to make this a track race versus let's set things up, cycle, shoot, whether it be shots from the point through traffic or one timers. I think that's going to be interesting to see what the percentage is in terms of that. So keep an eye out for that tonight. Like I said, a 4-3 win for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Solid performances from all around. Vasilevskiy having a night where really the Lightning are going to need him to really just come up big, maybe make a big save or two, as long as he's doing the little things. Kucherov will be involved. We all know that. Those top six, they will be involved. Very curious, like I said, when I mentioned Geeky, how is the bottom six do tonight? So we'll keep an eye out for that. And we'll be back next week to talk about the Lightning as their schedule ramps up. Like I said, we will too. So that's been it for this episode of Believe in Lightning, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'll talk to you in the next one.